The knife slid through the turkey breast with a sound like tearing fabric. My mother-in-law's hands were steady, her smile wider than I'd seen in months. She looked directly at me across the table and said, "Thanks to your miscarriage, our family line remains pure." The room didn't gasp. No one dropped their fork. My husband's hand went cold in mine. And I realized, in that terrible, clarifying moment, that I had been raising my daughter in a house that wanted her erased. If you've ever sat at a family table and felt your heart break in real time, this story is for you. Sometimes the cruelest words come wrapped in holiday cheer, and sometimes revenge doesn't look like fire. It looks like clarity. Hit that like button if you believe some bridges deserve to burn, and subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Also let me know in the comments section where you are listening from, because what happens next will leave you breathless. Now I would like you to do me a favor. Grab a cup of coffee and stay with me as we ride together into this story. I married Cain when I was 26. He was kind and steady, the type of man who remembered anniversaries and never raised his voice. His family seemed perfect from the outside. Big house in the suburbs, manicured lawn, holiday cards with everyone in matching sweaters. His mother, Diane, ran the household like a museum curator. Everything had its place, including people. I'm half Filipino. My mother immigrated when she was 19, worked 3 jobs and raised me and my brother in a cramped apartment that smelled like garlic rice and hope. I'm proud of where I come from. I'm proud of my thick black hair, my mother's cheekbones, the language she taught me in whispers so I wouldn't forget. But Diane never asked about any of that. The first Thanksgiving after Cain and I got engaged, she seated me at the far end of the table. Not next to Cain. Not near anyone really. Just close enough to hear the conversation but far enough to feel separate. When I offered to bring lumpia, she smiled tightly and said, "We're keeping it traditional this year." Traditional meant her recipes, her rules, and her version of what family should look like. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself love was bigger than one woman's small-mindedness. Cain assured me his mother just needed time to adjust. "She's old-fashioned," he'd say, like that explained away the chill in her voice whenever I entered a room. But I stayed. I smiled and I played the role of the gracious daughter-in-law because I believed if I was patient enough, kind enough, perfect enough, she would eventually see me as family. Then I got pregnant. The test showed 2 lines on a Tuesday morning. I stared at it in the bathroom of our small apartment, hands trembling, heart pounding so hard I thought Cain could hear it through the walls. When I told him, he lifted me off the ground and spun me in a circle, laughing and crying at the same time. We told his family that weekend. Diane's face didn't change. She set down her coffee cup with a soft clink and said, "Well, that's certainly fast." Cain's father, Norman, clapped Cain on the back. "Congratulations, son." But Diane just stared at me. Her eyes moved from my face to my stomach, slow and assessing, like she was calculating something unpleasant. "I suppose we'll need to start planning," she said finally. "There's a lot to consider." I didn't understand what she meant then. I thought she was talking about baby showers and nursery colors. I didn't realize she was already planning how to manage me. The pregnancy was hard. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion so deep I'd fall asleep sitting up. But I pushed through because every flutter, every tiny kick reminded me that I was building something beautiful. Cain was attentive, loving, and everything I needed. His mother, though, became a shadow I couldn't shake. She started showing up unannounced. Letting herself in with the spare key Cain had given her years ago. She'd walk through our apartment, touching things, rearranging them, commenting on everything from the dust on the shelves to the prenatal vitamins I took. "You should be taking the organic ones," she'd say. "You don't know what's in these." Or, "That's too much spice for the baby. You need to eat blander." Or once, running her hand along my bookshelf, "I hope the child doesn't inherit too many of your features." I froze. Cain was in the other room. I wanted to scream, to throw her out, to tell her exactly what I thought of her thinly veiled racism. But I was 12 weeks pregnant, exhausted, and terrified of causing a rift that Cain would have to navigate. So I smiled and said nothing. That's what I did best. Smile and say nothing. At 15 weeks I started spotting. Light at first, just enough to worry me. Cain drove me to the hospital, holding my hand the entire way, whispering that everything would be okay. But it wasn't. The doctor's face was kind but sad. "I'm so sorry," she said. "There's no heartbeat." The world collapsed into a single silent scream. I don't remember much about the days that followed. There was a procedure. There were pamphlets about grief. There were people telling me it was common, that I could try again, that time would heal. But nobody mentioned the hollow weight that settled into my chest. The way I'd wake up at night reaching for my stomach, forgetting for just a moment that it was empty. Kane cried with me. He held me when I couldn't hold myself. But even he didn't fully understand the specific gendered grief of losing something that had been growing inside you. The way your body mourns what your heart already loves. Diane came to visit 3 days after the miscarriage. He brought a casserole. Set it on the counter. Looked at me with something that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite relief. These things happen, she said. Especially with mixed genetics. The body knows when something isn't right. I stared at her. My throat closed and my vision blurred. Kane mercifully was in the shower. He didn't hear her. Didn't see the way she patted my hand like she was comforting me while actually delivering a quiet, brutal verdict. I should have said something then. I should have told Kane what his mother had implied. But I was broken, and grief makes you doubt your own perceptions. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe she didn't mean it that way, or maybe I was being too sensitive. So I stayed silent. And Diane learned she could say anything. 6 months passed. We tried again. This time I got pregnant with twins. The ultrasound showed 2 tiny heartbeats, fluttering like Morse code. Kane wept. I wept. For the first time since the miscarriage, I felt hope crack through the grief. But I didn't tell Diane right away. I waited until I was past the first trimester, until I felt safer and the doctor said everything looked healthy. When we finally told her, she went very still. Twins, she repeated. Are you sure you can handle that? We're thrilled, Kane said, squeezing my hand. Diane's smile was thin. Well, I suppose we'll see. That phrase became her favorite. Whenever I mentioned plans for the nursery or names we were considering, or my excitement about having 2 babies at once, she'd nod slowly and say, we'll see. Like she was waiting for me to fail. Or she expected my body to betray me again. At 20 weeks I started having contractions. Too early. Way too early. Kane rushed me to the hospital, driving so fast I thought we'd crash. The doctors managed to stop the labor, put me on bed rest and monitored me closely. But the twins were fragile. The doctors said it could go either way. Diane visited me in the hospital. Sat in the chair beside my bed. Looked at the monitors tracking 2 tiny heartbeats. Maybe, she said softly, this is a sign. I turned my head slowly. A sign of what? That some things aren't meant to be. My hands curled into fists beneath the thin hospital blanket. My babies are meant to be. She stood, smoothed her skirt. I'm just saying, if something happens, it might be for the best. Save everyone a lot of complications. She left before I could respond. Before I could scream and call her the monster she was. Kane came back 10 minutes later with coffee. I told him what his mother had said, voice shaking with rage and fear. He looked pained. She's just worried, babe. She doesn't mean it the way it sounds. Then how does she mean it? He didn't have an answer. I stayed on bed rest for 6 weeks. Kane worked from home, took care of me, brought me meals and books and held me when the fear became too much. But every few days Diane would visit, and every visit felt like a countdown. She'd ask how I was feeling with a tone that suggested she was hoping for bad news. She'd touch my stomach with cold fingers, like she was checking if it was still there. She'd make comments about how tired I looked, how stressed, how maybe I should consider all options. At 32 weeks I went into labor for real. It was fast and terrifying. I barely made it to the hospital before my daughter was born, 3 pounds 2 ounces, screaming with a voice that shook the delivery room. Her brother followed 6 minutes later, quieter, smaller, 2 pounds 11 ounces. They were tiny, fragile and perfect. The NICU became our second home. Kane and I took shifts, sitting beside their incubators, watching their chests rise and fall, counting every breath like a prayer. Diane visited once. I looked at them through the glass. Said, they're so small. I hope they make it. No, I know they'll make it. They're fighters. Hope. Like she was rooting for a different outcome. Tyler didn't hear the venom in her voice. He was too focused on our babies, too exhausted and too hopeful to see what I saw. But I saw it and I felt it. And I started planning. The twins came home after 7 weeks in the NICU. Our daughter Isla was fierce and loud. Our son Simon was quieter, gentler, but just as strong. They were miracles. And I was not going to let Diane poison their lives. For months I played the perfect daughter-in-law. I invited her over. I sent photos. I let her hold the babies while I gritted my teeth and smiled. But I also started paying attention. I noticed how she'd comment on Isla's darker skin tone. She looks more like you, she'd say, like it was a diagnosis. I noticed how she'd compare them to Kane's baby photos. Simon has the family nose at least. I noticed how she'd make jokes about mixed babies being exotic, her tone hovering somewhere between fascination and disgust. And I documented everything. I started keeping a journal. Date, time, exact quotes. I recorded conversations on my phone when I knew she'd be particularly cruel. I saved text messages where she'd suggest the twins might have developmental issues because of my genetics. Kane still didn't see it. He thought his mother was just old-fashioned, awkward and struggling to adjust. But I knew better. I was raising my children in the presence of someone who thought they shouldn't exist. And then came Thanksgiving. Diane insisted on hosting. It's tradition, she said. The whole family comes to our house. I didn't want to go. Every instinct told me to stay home and protect my babies from her toxicity. But Kane begged. It's Thanksgiving, babe. Just one day. For me. So I went. We arrived at noon. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. Diane greeted us at the door, all smiles, already reaching for the twins. Let me hold them, she cooed. I handed Isla over reluctantly. I watched Diane's face as she looked down at my daughter. She's getting darker, Diane observed. That happens sometimes. My jaw clenched. Kane was already inside, greeting his father, oblivious. Dinner was the usual performance. Diane at the head of the table orchestrating everything. Kane's siblings and their perfect white children filling the other seats. And me once again seated far enough away to feel separate. The twins were in their carriers beside me, sleeping peacefully. Diane stood to carve the turkey. She made a whole production of it, sharpening the knife, testing the blade, smiling at everyone like a queen surveying her kingdom. Then she looked at me. I have something to say, she announced. The table went quiet. She carved the first slice, laid it on the platter and continued. This year I'm especially grateful. Everyone murmured agreement. I'm grateful, she continued, that our family line remains pure. My stomach dropped. When Kane's wife had her miscarriage last year, I prayed it was for the best. And it was. Because if that baby had survived, well. She paused, smile widening. Let's just say complications were avoided. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Kane's fork hovered halfway to his mouth. Diane looked directly at me. And these two, she gestured toward Isla and Simon. Well, we'll see how they turn out. Mixed children are always a gamble, aren't they? The knife slid through the turkey breast with a sound like tearing fabric. My mother's hands were steady, her smile wider than I'd seen in months. My husband's hand went cold in mine. And I realized in that terrible, clarifying moment that I had been raising my daughter in a house that wanted her erased. But I didn't cry or scream. I just nodded. And I said very quietly, "Excuse me." I stood. I picked up Isla's carrier. Then Simon's. I walked toward the door. Kane finally found his voice. "Babe, wait." "No," I said. Not loud or dramatic. Just done. Diane laughed. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. I'm just being honest." I turned back. I looked at her. Really looked at her. "You're right," I said. "You're being honest. And so am I." I pulled out my phone. Opened the folder I'd been curating for months. And I hit send. Every family member at that table received the same email. Every single one. Subject line, "What Diane really thinks." Inside, recordings, screenshots, dated journal entries. Every vile comment. Every racist joke. Every cruel prediction about my babies and every moment she'd wished them erased. All of it. In her own voice and her own words. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said. Then I walked out. Kane followed me to the car. "What did you just do?" "I stopped protecting her," I said. "I stopped pretending." His phone started buzzing. Then his siblings' phones. Then his father's. Inside the house I heard shouting. Kane stared at me, torn between defending his mother and defending his family. "Choose," I said quietly. "Because I'm not raising our children around someone who thinks they're genetic mistakes." He looked back at the house. Then at Isla and Simon, sleeping peacefully in their carriers. Then at me. Let's go home, he said. We drove in silence. Kane's phone kept buzzing. I turned mine off. When we got home, Kane fed the babies while I sat at the kitchen table shaking. She's calling, he said after a while. Everyone's calling. Let them. My dad's furious. My brother says mom's crying. My sister. I don't care. He sat down across from me. That was a lot. It was the truth. I know. He reached for my hand. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. You didn't want to. No, I didn't. He looked at our children then back at me. But I see it now. And I'm sorry. Over the next week, the fallout was spectacular. Kane's father called to apologize. Said he'd had no idea how bad it was. Said he was handling it. Kane's siblings were split. His brother defended Diane. His sister sent a long message saying she'd always known their mother had a problem, but didn't know how to address it. Diane herself never apologized. She told people I'd taken things out of context. That I was overly sensitive. That she'd been joking. But the recordings didn't lie. And slowly, person by person, the family started choosing sides. Kane's father moved out 2 months later. Filed for separation. Told Kane that hearing his wife celebrate their grandchild's death had broken something he couldn't repair. Kane's sister cut contact with Diane entirely. Started bringing her kids to visit us instead. Kane's brother still defends her. We haven't spoken to him since. As for Diane, she sends cards on the twins' birthdays. They go straight in the trash. She tried to visit once, 6 months after Thanksgiving. Showed up unannounced, holding toys, crying and begging to see her grandchildren. I opened the door. I looked at her. And said, no. She tried to push past me. They're my grandchildren. They're my children. And you don't get to celebrate their deaths and then demand access to their lives. He stood there, mascara running, hands trembling. Please, she whispered. I closed the door. Kane found me in the kitchen afterward, leaning against the counter trying not to shake. You okay? He asked. I don't know. He pulled me into a hug. Thank you. For what? For protecting them. For being stronger than I was. I held him tight. I'm their mother. That's what I do. Slaw is 3 now. Simon is quieter but keeps up with his sister in his own way. They don't know about Diane. They don't know about the miscarriage or the NICU or the Thanksgiving that split the family in half. Someday I'll tell them. Someday they'll ask why they don't have a grandmother on their father's side. And I'll tell them the truth. That some people can't see past their own hate. That some people mistake cruelty for tradition. And that walking away from toxicity, even when it's family, isn't betrayal. It's survival. Kane and I are stronger now. Not because things got easier but because we stopped pretending they were. His father remarried. A kind woman who sends the twins books and treats them like the miracles they are. Kane's sister hosts Thanksgiving now. It's smaller. Quieter and better. Me. I sleep better now. I don't flinch when the doorbell rings. I don't check my phone expecting cruelty disguised as concern. I look at my children, their dark hair, their bright eyes, their beautiful, resilient selves, and I know I made the right choice. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to let hate sit at your table. Sometimes it's choosing your children over keeping the peace. Sometimes it's saying no and meaning it. And sometimes the best revenge is simply this. Living well, loving fiercely, and refusing to carry someone else's poison into your home. Diane lost her grandchildren, her husband, half her family, and her carefully curated reputation. I gained clarity, boundaries, and a family built on truth instead of performance. In the end, I didn't destroy her life. I just stopped letting her destroy mine. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between family and self-respect, drop a comment and let me know. Hit that subscribe button if you believe some relationships aren't worth saving. And like this video if you think protecting your children matters more than keeping the peace. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we're told we have to forgive. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. And family doesn't mean a free pass. Thank you for listening. And remember, you don't owe anyone a seat at your table, especially if they've spent years wishing you weren't at theirs. See you in the next one.